But in less than an hour, they were all awakened. The owner, Mr. Peter Thomas Piperson, came with a lantern and a hamper to catch 6 of the fowls to take them to market in the morning. He grabbed the hen roosting next to the cockerel, and then his eye fell upon Pigling Bland. Pigling Bland was squeezed in a corner. The farmer made a remark. "Hello, here's another." And he seized Pigling by the scruff of the neck and dropped him into the hamper. Then he dropped in 5 more cackling hens on top of Pigling Bland. The hamper containing the 6 fowls and the young pig was no light weight as the farmer took it down the hill unsteadily. Pigling inside the hamper was nearly scratched to pieces, and he contrived to hide his papers and his peppermints safely inside his clothes. Finally, the hamper was bumped down upon a kitchen floor, and it was opened. Pigling was lifted out. He looked up, blinking, and saw an ugly, elderly man grinning at him from ear to ear. "This one's come of himself, whatever," said Mr. Piperson, turning Pigling's pockets inside out. He pushed the hamper into the corner and threw a cloth over it to keep the hens quiet, and put a pot on the fire and unlaced his boots. Pigling drew forward a little stool and sat on the edge of it, shyly warming his hands. Mr. Piperson pulled off a boot and threw it against the wainscot at the further end of the kitchen. There was a smothered noise. "Shut up," said Mr. Piperson. Pigling Bland warmed his hands and eyed him. Mr. Piperson pulled off the other boot and flung it after the first. Again there was a curious noise. "Be quiet, will you?" Pigling sat on the edge of that stool, listening. Mr. Piperson fetched a meal from the chest and made porridge. It seemed to Pigling that at the further end of the kitchen, something was taking a very suppressed interest in the cooking. But Pigling was too hungry to be troubled by that right now. Mr. Piperson poured out 3 platefuls, one for himself, one for Pigling, and a third. After glaring at Pigling, he put it away with much scuffling, and he locked it up. Pigling Bland ate his supper very discreetly. After supper, Mr. Piperson consulted a large book. He felt Pigling's ribs. It was too late in the season for bacon, and he grudged that possible meal. Besides, the hens had already seen the pig. He looked undecidedly at Pigling. "You may sleep on the rug," said Mr. Peter Thomas Piperson. Pigling Bland slept like a log. In the morning, Mr. Piperson made more porridge, and the weather was a little warmer. He looked at how much meal was left in the chest and seemed dissatisfied. "You'll likely be moving on again," he said to Pigling Bland. Before Pigling could reply, a neighbour who was giving Mr. Piperson and the hens a lift whistled from the gate. Mr. Piperson hurled out with the hamper and asked Pigling to shut the door. "I'll come back and skin ye if you touch anything," said Mr. Piperson. It crossed Pigling's mind that if he'd asked for a lift, he might still have been in time for market too. But he distrusted Peter Thomas.